Each human being is much more than the sum of their actions, thoughts, and behaviors. We are complex individuals, constantly evolving and shaped by a variety of inner and outer influences. Too often, society tries to pigeonhole people into categories, labels that don't reflect the full spectrum of who they truly are. To understand yourself, it is crucial to recognize that you are not one-dimensional. Your personality is made up of multiple layers, and beneath every decision, every interaction, there are deeper psychological functions at work. It is these hidden functions that shape the way you experience life, and understanding them can unlock a more profound sense of self-awareness. At the heart of your being are four distinct psychological functions: thinking, feeling, sensing, and intuiting. These functions are not random or arbitrary. They are essential parts of the way you process information, make decisions, and relate to the world around you. These cognitive functions work together to form the unique pattern that is your personality. However, at any given time, one of these functions tends to dominate your mental processes, shaping your perception and behavior more strongly than the others. By understanding these functions, you can see that your mind is a complex, dynamic system, not a static, unchanging entity. The first of these functions is thinking, which refers to how you process information logically, analytically, and objectively. If thinking is your dominant function, you are likely someone who prioritizes rationality over emotion in decision making. You analyze situations, weigh pros and cons, and seek to make decisions based on evidence and logical consistency. Thinking types are often drawn to fields that require objective problem solving, such as science, engineering, or philosophy. However, it's important to recognize that even within this logical framework, thinking is not simply about being detached or cold. Every decision, even the most rational, is influenced by subconscious drives and personal values that can make the reasoning process unique to each individual. The opposite of thinking is feeling, which refers to how you make judgments based on personal values, emotions, and the impact your decisions have on others. If feeling is your dominant function, you may prioritize harmony, connection, and empathy in your interactions. You make decisions by considering how they align with your values and the feelings of others. This function often leads people to careers in counseling, teaching, or any field where human connection and emotional intelligence are at the forefront. While feeling types may be seen as driven by emotion, the truth is that they rely heavily on an internal, deeply held value system to guide their choices, often valuing compassion and understanding over cold logic. Then there is sensing, which involves perceiving the world through tangible, concrete details and facts. Sensing types are typically grounded in the present moment, focused on what is real, and can be observed through the five senses. They are often practical and detail-oriented, preferring to work with what is known rather than speculate about the unknown. Sensing is rooted in the here and now, emphasizing practicality and experience over theory or abstraction. People with this function as dominant are often skilled at hands on tasks such as craftsmanship or healthcare, where attention to detail and accuracy are key. Sensing types are often seen as realistic, yet they also bring a depth of richness to their experiences because they tend to focus on the small, nuanced details that others might overlook. The fourth function is intuiting, which is more abstract and future-oriented. Intuition is how people see patterns, possibilities, and future outcomes. It's not about the immediate facts, but rather about understanding the bigger picture and seeing connections between ideas that might not be immediately obvious. Intuitive types are often visionary thinkers, drawn to creative endeavors or strategic planning. They excel in fields where abstract thinking and innovation are valued, such as technology, art, or entrepreneurship. People with intuitive dominance are often driven by what could be, rather than what is, constantly searching for new possibilities and seeking out deeper meanings in the world around them. Although these functions are different, they are not mutually exclusive. We all use each of them to some degree, but one will typically be more dominant than the others, guiding how we experience the world. The real beauty lies in understanding that we are not defined by a single function, but rather by the complex interplay between these various modes of perception and judgment. Your personality is not defined by just one aspect of who you are, but by how these functions work together in harmony or tension. Your way of thinking, feeling, sensing, and intuiting create a unique lens through which you view and interact with the world. It's crucial to understand that while one function may dominate, it doesn't diminish the importance of the others. The secondary functions, those that are not as prominent but still present, bring balance to your dominant trait. For example, if thinking is your dominant function, your secondary function might be feeling, which means that while you may prioritize logic in your decisions, you also have an innate awareness of how your choices affect the emotional well-being of others. This interaction between functions prevents you from becoming too rigid in your thinking or behavior, and offers a way to stay grounded in reality while also acknowledging your emotional responses. It's also essential to recognize that there is no such thing as a perfect or better personality type. Each type has its strengths and challenges, and all of them are valuable in their own right. People with dominant thinking are excellent problem solvers, but they might struggle with emotional expression. People with dominant feeling may be highly empathetic, but at times they may neglect practical concerns. People with dominant sensing are grounded in the present, but they may resist change or new ideas. Intuitive types can see future possibilities, but they may overlook details. No one is wholly defined by any one trait, and understanding this complexity allows you to embrace your full potential. By acknowledging that you are not one-dimensional, you allow yourself the freedom to explore all facets of your personality. Rather than seeing yourself as fixed, you begin to understand that you are a constantly evolving individual, shaped by various influences and forces. You are a work in progress, and your personality is a dynamic, living thing that grows, shifts, and adapts. Recognizing that you are not limited to a single aspect of your being is the first step toward true self-awareness, and it opens the door to embracing the full spectrum of who you can be. At the core of your personality lies the dominant function, the guiding force that shapes how you interact with the world and make decisions. This function is the most developed and influential part of your psychological makeup. It's the lens through which you perceive reality, and it serves as your primary method for processing information and navigating life. Think of the dominant function as the compass that directs your path. It's the psychological energy that drives your behavior, affects your interactions with others, and influences your emotional and intellectual life. Understanding your dominant function is key to understanding your natural tendencies and strengths, as well as the challenges that may arise when you fail to recognize or embrace it fully. The dominant function is the most conscious part of your personality. It's the one you use the most effortlessly and automatically, often without thinking. If you are naturally drawn to logical reasoning, analyzing situations objectively, and making decisions based on facts and evidence, your dominant function is likely thinking. Those with a dominant thinking function tend to excel in fields that require precision, critical analysis, and systematic problem solving. You approach the world through a lens of logic, prioritizing order and structure. In conversations, you might be the one to point out the inconsistencies or flaws in arguments, seeking to understand the cause and effect relationships of a situation. In your personal life, you may gravitate toward careers or activities that challenge your intellect, such as engineering, science, or philosophy. Alternatively, if you make decisions based on your emotions, values, and empathy for others, your dominant function is likely feeling. People with this dominant function are deeply connected to the emotional currents around them, and they are highly attuned to how decisions affect their relationships and the feelings of others. You may find yourself naturally drawn to professions or activities that involve helping others, such as counseling, teaching, or the arts. Your decisions are often guided by an internal moral compass, and you tend to consider the emotional well-being of others when making choices. The feeling function is rooted in compassion, understanding, and the drive to connect with people on a deep emotional level. You might find it difficult to detach yourself from the emotions of a situation, sometimes prioritizing harmony over practicality or logic. If your dominant function is sensing, you are likely to be grounded in the present moment, focusing on facts, details, and the tangible world around you. Sensing types are practical, realistic, and detail-oriented, preferring to work with what is concrete and observable rather than abstract concepts or theoretical ideas. Your mind is finely tuned to the physical world, and you rely heavily on your senses to process and understand information. This function is particularly helpful in fields where precision and attention to detail are crucial, such as healthcare, craftsmanship, or any hands-on profession. People with a dominant sensing function excel in jobs that require practical, real-world skills and a keen awareness of their environment. You likely prefer to stick with what you know, avoiding speculation or jumping to conclusions before gathering all the necessary information. The sensing function anchors you in the present, and your natural approach to life is grounded in reality, often resisting anything that feels too abstract or disconnected from tangible experience. On the other hand, if your dominant function is intuiting, you likely view the world through the lens of possibilities, patterns, and future potential. Intuitive types are more concerned with the bigger picture than with the details. You are often future-oriented, focusing on what could be rather than what is. This function is inherently visionary, drawing connections between disparate ideas and seeking deeper meanings in life. You might be the one to suggest new ideas, creative solutions, or innovative approaches to problems, often thinking several steps ahead. Intuition thrives in environments that encourage creativity, change, and innovation. People with a dominant intuitive function are often drawn to fields such as technology, art, writing, or entrepreneurship, where imagination and the ability to see beyond the present moment are highly valued. While you might struggle with the mundane details of day-to-day life, your strength lies in your ability to envision future possibilities and chart new courses. Intuitive types are often known for their curiosity and their constant search for novel experiences and insights. The power of the dominant function lies in its ability to shape not only your perception of the world, but also your approach to problem solving and decision making. Each dominant function has its own set of strengths and challenges. People with dominant thinking functions tend to be highly logical, objective, and analytical, but they may also struggle with emotional expression and empathy. Those with dominant feeling functions are compassionate, empathetic, and in tune with the emotions of others, but they may sometimes become overwhelmed by the emotional weight of situations, putting their own needs aside in favor of others. Sensing types are incredibly grounded, practical, and focused on the here and now. yet they may struggle to see beyond the immediate and embrace abstract ideas or future possibilities. Intuitive types are often visionary, creative, and innovative, but they may find it difficult to stay grounded in the present or deal with the practical, mundane aspects of life. The dominant function doesn't just guide how you think, it shapes how you approach life as a whole. If thinking is your dominant function, you will likely prefer clarity, structure, and logical coherence in all aspects of life, including your relationships, work, and personal development. Your interactions with others may be more intellectual than emotional, and you may find it challenging to deal with people who act impulsively or without clear reasoning. If feeling is your dominant function, your relationships will likely be central to your identity. You may place a high value on emotional connection, seeking out environments where empathy and compassion are prioritized. You might find it difficult to be around people who are overly critical or cold, as their lack of emotional awareness could be unsettling to you. Those with a dominant sensing function are likely to be deeply rooted in their environment, finding comfort in routine, reliability, and tangible experiences. You may feel uncomfortable in situations that are uncertain or abstract, preferring clear and concrete facts over theories and speculation. Intuitive types, on the other hand, tend to approach life with an open mind, always looking for new opportunities and insights. You might feel constrained by rigid systems or overly structured environments, as they limit your ability to explore new ideas and possibilities. Your dominant function, by guiding how you make decisions and navigate the world, sets the tone for your life's path. However, it's important to remember that no function exists in isolation. The secondary function, which complements the dominant one, also plays a significant role in balancing your personality and broadening your perspectives. Together, these functions form a cohesive whole, but the dominant function remains the key player in how you interact with the world. Embracing the strengths and challenges of your dominant function can provide clarity, direction, and purpose as you move forward in life. Recognizing its power and influence helps you understand not only your behavior, but also your potential for growth and self-realization. When you live in harmony with your dominant function, you unlock a greater sense of authenticity and purpose, allowing your path to unfold with greater ease and understanding. Every individual has a dominant function, the primary psychological process that drives their approach to life, decisions, and interactions with the world. However, it is the secondary function that provides balance to this dominant aspect, creating a more complete and nuanced personality. The secondary function, though less dominant, plays a critical role in shaping how you navigate your world, helping you stay grounded and making your interactions with the world and others more adaptable. It serves as a counterpoint to your dominant function, often working in a complementary way to mitigate the excesses of your primary mode of thinking or perceiving. This balance is not only essential for emotional and intellectual well-being, but it also creates a dynamic and harmonious inner life, where strengths and weaknesses are integrated. This secondary function is the part of you that helps you make sense of the world in ways your dominant function cannot. Where your dominant function is often natural and automatic, the secondary function is something you must actively develop and refine. In essence, it provides you with a broader and more adaptable framework through which to interact with different situations and people. Without this secondary function, you may become one-sided, too rigid in your behavior, or overly attached to a singular perspective. For example, if your dominant function is thinking, you may excel at analysis, logic, and problem solving, but you may struggle to recognize the emotional impacts of your decisions on others. Your secondary function of feeling, then, is the antidote, urging you to recognize how your actions affect others emotionally, ensuring that your decisions take into account not only facts, but also the people behind them. Similarly, if your dominant function is feeling, your secondary function might be thinking, offering a more logical approach when emotions cloud judgment. In these cases, thinking serves as a grounding mechanism, helping you balance emotional decisions with more objective reasoning. Feeling types can sometimes become overwhelmed by emotions or lose sight of practical realities, but by honing the thinking function, they become better equipped to handle situations where detached reasoning and logical analysis are required. The secondary function is not about suppressing your dominant traits, but rather integrating them with other perspectives to make more rounded and well-considered decisions. For those with sensing as a dominant function, the secondary function often involves intuition, which serves as a counterbalance to their grounded, detail-oriented nature. Sensing types are very much in touch with the present, living in the here and now, and focusing on concrete facts and sensory experiences. However, the addition of intuition as a secondary function allows them to broaden their vision, think beyond immediate experiences, and consider future possibilities. Intuition helps sensing types step back from focusing only on what is tangible and move toward considering larger patterns and future outcomes. This can be particularly useful in situations that require innovation or creativity, where intuition helps break free from the constraints of the present moment and see new opportunities or directions. For intuitive types, the secondary function often involves sensing, which provides a necessary connection to the physical world and the present moment. While intuition is driven by abstract thinking and future possibilities, sensing offers a practical, grounded way of engaging with the world. Intuitive types can sometimes become lost in abstract ideas, dreaming of possibilities without considering the concrete steps needed to turn those ideas into reality. By cultivating their sensing function, they can develop a better understanding of the immediate, tangible aspects of their environment. This balance between intuition and sensing allows them to both envision future potentials and deal with the concrete, present-day realities that must be addressed in order to bring their visions to life. The secondary function, therefore, offers a crucial balancing mechanism in the psyche, preventing any one mode of thinking from becoming too overpowering or disconnected from reality. It provides the flexibility and adaptability necessary for coping with a variety of situations, ensuring that your decisions and actions are more well-rounded and mindful of both the emotional and practical aspects of life. It's not enough to simply rely on your dominant function to navigate the world. The secondary function ensures that you are also capable of approaching situations from multiple angles, considering a broader range of factors, and integrating diverse perspectives. In many ways, the secondary function allows you to grow beyond the confines of your dominant traits. It's easy to get stuck in patterns of thinking or behavior that only reinforce your natural tendencies. But when you actively engage with your secondary function, you open yourself to new possibilities and approaches. For instance, a dominant thinking type might become so absorbed in logic that they neglect the importance of human emotions in their decisions. By cultivating their secondary feeling function, they can develop greater empathy and understanding of others' emotional needs, enriching their relationships and decision-making process. Similarly, a feeling dominant individual can benefit from integrating a secondary thinking function, which provides them with a clearer, more logical approach to situations where emotions might cloud their judgment. In this way, the secondary function serves as a gateway to deeper self-awareness and growth. By developing it, you not only become more balanced in your decision-making and interactions, but also create an internal dialogue between your dominant and secondary traits, allowing both to contribute to your overall sense of self. This balance is essential for your mental and emotional health, providing you with the flexibility to deal with a wide range of life circumstances, each of which may require a different approach or mindset. The secondary function also plays a significant role in how you interact with others. In relationships, whether personal or professional, you are more likely to understand and empathize with people who use different functions than you, if you've developed a solid understanding of your own secondary function. For instance, if your dominant function is thinking and you cultivate your secondary feeling function, you'll have a better understanding of people who make decisions based on emotion, allowing you to communicate more effectively and avoid conflicts that arise from misunderstanding emotional needs. Similarly, someone with a dominant feeling function who develops their thinking function will find it easier to navigate situations where decisions need to be made without relying solely on emotional impulses. The relationship between your dominant and secondary functions is not always perfect. It can often feel like a tug-of-war between opposing energies, each pulling in a different direction. However, this tension is where growth happens. By learning to integrate your secondary function, you learn to adapt to changing circumstances and grow into a more well-rounded person. Instead of seeing your secondary function as a weakness or a contrast to your dominant traits, view it as an opportunity to round out your personality, offering you both depth and flexibility. The beauty of the secondary function is that it allows you to access new parts of your psyche, integrating your strengths and weaknesses into a cohesive whole. It helps you stay balanced, adaptable, and more in tune with both your internal world and the external world, ultimately guiding you toward a more fulfilling and authentic life. By nurturing and embracing your secondary function, you create a sense of harmony within yourself, allowing you to face life's challenges with more resilience, insight, and balance. Every individual carries within them a delicate interplay between their primary and secondary psychological functions, creating a dynamic tension that shapes how they experience the world and respond to it. This tension, though often subtle, can be felt deeply at times, as the primary function often drives us in one direction, while the secondary function attempts to provide balance and a different perspective. It is this internal tug-of-war that leads to growth, insight, and ultimately a deeper understanding of oneself. While the primary function is the dominant mode of perception and action, providing clarity and direction, the secondary function offers a counterbalance, often challenging the tendencies of the primary function and forcing a reconciliation between two competing forces. The primary function, also known as the dominant function, is the most developed aspect of your personality. It operates almost automatically, shaping how you interact with the world and make decisions. It defines the lens through which you interpret reality, guiding your actions, thoughts, and choices. The secondary function, in contrast, is less developed but nonetheless critical for balance. It exists to moderate the excesses of the dominant function and to help you approach situations from a different angle. However, this process is not always smooth or easy. The natural tension that arises between these two functions can often be experienced as an inner conflict, one that challenges your sense of self and forces you to confront different aspects of your personality that might not always feel harmonious. Take, for example, the relationship between thinking and feeling. If your dominant function is thinking, you are likely someone who values logic, objectivity, and rationality in your decision making. You prioritize clear, rational analysis over emotional considerations, often making decisions based on evidence and logic rather than personal values or emotional responses. However, your secondary function, which could be feeling, adds complexity to this approach. The feeling function urges you to consider how your decisions will impact others emotionally and whether they align with your deeper values and morals. This creates an inherent tension, as the logical, analytical nature of thinking often clashes with the emotional, value-driven nature of feeling. When these two functions are in conflict, you may experience a sense of being torn between making a decision based on what makes sense and what feels right, leading to internal frustration and indecision. Over time, this tension can push you to find a more harmonious way to integrate both functions, but only by consciously developing and engaging with your secondary function. In a similar way, if feeling is your dominant function, you may find that your decisions are primarily guided by your emotional responses, your empathy for others, and your values. You are attuned to the emotional dynamics of situations, often considering how your choices will affect the feelings of others. However, when your secondary function is thinking, this emotional perspective can feel challenged. Thinking, with its focus on logic, detachment, and analysis, may clash with your desire to prioritize emotional harmony and compassion. This can lead to moments of internal conflict, where you might feel torn between doing what is logically sound and what feels emotionally fulfilling. For someone with dominant feeling and secondary thinking, the task is to find a balance where both the emotional and rational elements of a situation can be respected, which requires developing both functions in tandem and learning when to rely on each. For those whose dominant function is sensing, the tension between sensing and intuition can be just as pronounced. Sensing types are focused on the present moment, the tangible details of the world around them, and what they can observe through their five senses. They tend to prioritize facts, practicality, and concrete experiences over abstract theories or possibilities. However, when intuition is the secondary function, there is an inherent tension between staying grounded in the here and now and the pull to explore future possibilities or abstract ideas. Intuition urges you to look beyond the present and to consider patterns, connections, and future outcomes. This can be overwhelming for sensing types, who may feel uncomfortable with uncertainty or abstract thinking. The tension between these functions often manifests in situations where you must either deal with the immediate, practical aspects of life or explore new, uncharted possibilities. While the sensing function provides stability and a sense of security, intuition offers the potential for growth and innovation. Finding harmony between these two functions requires learning to step out of your comfort zone and embrace a balance between the present and the future, the concrete and the abstract. On the other hand, intuitive types often experience tension when their secondary function is sensing. Intuitive individuals are naturally oriented toward the future, abstract concepts, and patterns that emerge from ideas. They see connections and possibilities that others might overlook, and they are often guided by what could be rather than what is. However, sensing, as the secondary function, requires them to pay attention to the concrete details of the present moment, which can feel limiting or restrictive. Intuitive types might struggle with mundane tasks or situations that require a focus on the immediate sensory world. and they may feel stifled by the need to deal with facts and reality. The tension between these two functions can cause frustration when intuitive types must confront the practical demands of life. Yet it can also be a source of strength when they develop the ability to ground their visionary ideas in the reality of the present moment. Learning to integrate sensing with intuition allows them to take abstract ideas and transform them into something real and actionable. While these tensions between primary and secondary functions can be challenging, they also represent opportunities for growth. The struggle between these forces can be uncomfortable, as it forces you to confront parts of your personality that may feel foreign or difficult to integrate. However, it is through this struggle that personal development occurs. By learning to balance and harmonize these opposing energies, you not only gain a deeper understanding of your strengths and weaknesses, but also develop the ability to navigate the complexities of life with greater adaptability and resilience. The tension between your primary and secondary functions also manifests in your relationships with others. Because your dominant function shapes the way you view the world, you may naturally gravitate toward people who share similar traits or functions. However, it is often the contrast between your primary and secondary functions that creates the potential for personal growth and deeper connections. People with different dominant functions may challenge you, forcing you to look at the world from a different perspective. For example, a thinking, dominant individual may find it difficult to understand how someone with a dominant feeling function makes decisions based on emotions. But over time, this interaction can help them develop a greater appreciation for the emotional aspects of life. Similarly, a sensing, dominant person might learn to embrace intuition as a way to innovate and explore new possibilities when they are forced to reconcile these contrasting functions within themselves. The tension between your primary and secondary functions is a natural and inevitable part of the human experience, one that pushes you toward greater self-awareness and integration. Rather than seeing this tension as a negative force, it is better to view it as a catalyst for growth. By consciously engaging with both your dominant and secondary functions, you can achieve a more balanced, flexible, and authentic version of yourself. The process of integrating these functions, though challenging at times, ultimately leads to a deeper understanding of who you are and how you interact with the world around you. The tension between your primary and secondary functions is not something to avoid, but something to embrace, as it holds the key to unlocking your true potential. The inferior function is one of the most misunderstood and underestimated aspects of personality. It is the psychological function that lies in the unconscious, often repressed, and not immediately accessible to the individual. While the dominant and secondary functions typically guide how we interact with the world, the inferior function remains in the background, exerting influence on us in subtle and often unexpected ways. It is the least developed part of our personality, and because of this, it often represents the area of greatest potential for growth. Over time, learning to understand and integrate the inferior function can be one of the most transformative experiences in a person's life. Embracing this function, with all its complexities and contradictions, opens the door to deeper self-awareness, emotional resilience, and personal maturity. The inferior function is often the opposite of the dominant function and provides a counterbalance to it. For example, if thinking is your dominant function, your inferior function is likely feeling, or if you are a sensing type, your inferior function is likely intuition. This inverse relationship means that the inferior function is something that you are typically not very comfortable with or skilled at, and it may even be an area of avoidance. For instance, someone with a dominant thinking function might dismiss or undervalue emotions, seeing them as less rational or important. However, the inferior feeling function, which remains undeveloped, can exert its influence in unexpected ways, often showing up in moments of stress or emotional crisis, when logic and reasoning fail to provide solutions. The inferior function has a paradoxical nature. It is not completely unconscious, but exists in a shadow state. We may have an inkling of its existence, or we may experience its effects in a distorted or exaggerated way. For example, a thinking, dominant individual might sometimes react emotionally in situations where they feel overwhelmed or powerless, and this emotional outburst can feel alien to them, creating a sense of confusion or frustration. These reactions are typically not fully conscious, and they may be triggered by situations where the person feels out of control or threatened. The inferior function has a way of breaking through when the dominant function is not enough to deal with the complexity of a situation, revealing the areas of our personality that we have neglected or repressed. The inferior function, therefore, plays a significant role in personal growth because it can be a source of tension and struggle. As long as it remains repressed or ignored, it can lead to inner conflict, frustration, and feelings of incompleteness. However, when the individual begins to acknowledge the existence of this function and work to integrate it, the results can be profound. Engaging with the inferior function is not an easy task, as it requires confronting parts of ourselves that we are not entirely comfortable with. It demands vulnerability, self-compassion, and a willingness to step outside our usual ways of thinking and behaving. Incorporating the inferior function into our conscious experience can lead to a more integrated and balanced personality. For example, someone who is highly logical and rational might learn to appreciate and embrace the emotional aspects of life by developing their inferior feeling function. This may manifest in becoming more in tune with their own emotions, allowing themselves to express feelings that were previously suppressed or ignored. They might also become more empathetic to the emotions of others, learning to connect on a deeper, more personal level. This can lead to richer, more meaningful relationships, as well as a greater sense of emotional intelligence and well-being. The process of engaging with the inferior function involves moving beyond the comfort zone of the dominant function and becoming more flexible in how we perceive and react to the world. The inferior function is not just an area of weakness, it also holds the potential for great creativity and transformation. It can be the source of untapped talents or hidden strengths that, once integrated, can provide new insights and opportunities for personal development. For example, someone with a dominant sensing function might find that their inferior intuition brings a sense of creativity and possibility into their lives, helping them to think outside of the box and approach problems from a new angle. Similarly, a person with a dominant intuitive function might discover that their inferior sensing function helps them ground their ideas in practical reality, giving them the ability to create something tangible from their abstract visions. The process of developing the inferior function requires patience and introspection. It is not something that can be rushed or forced. It is a gradual process of becoming more aware of the areas where we are underdeveloped and learning to embrace the parts of ourselves that we have neglected. This may involve confronting feelings of shame or inadequacy, as the inferior function often represents the areas of our personality that we find most difficult to accept. However, as we learn to engage with and develop this function, we begin to experience greater wholeness, moving toward a more balanced sense of self. In many ways, the inferior function is like a seed that, when nurtured, can grow into something valuable and transformative. It represents our potential for growth and evolution, offering a new perspective on who we are and what we are capable of. Just as a plant needs time to grow and flourish, so too does the inferior function require patience, care, and attention in order to develop into a fully integrated part of the personality. As we grow in our understanding of this function, we become more adept at using it in a conscious and intentional way, leading to greater flexibility, creativity, and resilience in our approach to life. The role of the inferior function in personal growth also extends to our relationships with others. When we begin to integrate the inferior function, we become more whole, which allows us to relate to others in a more authentic way. We are less likely to project our repressed feelings or traits onto others, and we become more understanding of the complexities of human nature. As we engage with our own inferior function, we develop greater empathy for the differences in others, seeing them not as flaws but as opportunities for learning and growth. This can deepen our relationships, helping us to connect with others on a more profound level. The inferior function, while often challenging to confront, is a source of tremendous potential for growth and transformation. As we become more aware of its existence and begin the process of integrating it into our conscious experience, we unlock new dimensions of ourselves. This journey is not without its difficulties, as it requires us to face the parts of ourselves that we would rather ignore or suppress. However, the rewards of this journey are immense. By embracing the inferior function, we become more balanced, resilient, and capable of navigating the complexities of life with greater self-awareness and emotional intelligence. This process of growth is not a linear path, but a continual evolution that deepens our understanding of who we are and who we can become. The inferior function, when embraced and integrated, becomes a powerful tool for personal development, opening the door to a fuller, more authentic life. The concept of individuation is at the heart of understanding personal growth and the journey towards self-actualization. It is the process by which an individual moves toward becoming their true self, transcending the limitations of social expectations, inherited traits, and unconscious patterns. This journey involves reconciling the conscious and unconscious parts of the psyche, integrating various aspects of the self, and cultivating an inner harmony that allows for true authenticity. At its core, individuation is about becoming more whole, aligning one's outer behavior and inner essence, and realizing one's full potential. It is a journey of self-discovery, transformation, and deepening understanding, which unfolds over the course of a lifetime. The goal of individuation is not simply to develop a better version of oneself based on external standards or ideals, but rather to cultivate an authentic self that is deeply connected to the inner truth of who we are. This inner truth is often obscured by external influences, societal expectations, and the masks we wear to fit into the world. As a result, the journey of individuation requires peeling away these layers and confronting the parts of ourselves that we have repressed, denied, or failed to acknowledge. These hidden aspects of the self often represent untapped potentials, unresolved conflicts, or repressed desires that, when brought into conscious awareness, can lead to profound growth and liberation. One of the most essential components of individuation is the integration of the shadow, the unconscious aspect of the personality that contains all the qualities we have denied, rejected, or suppressed. The shadow represents the parts of ourselves that we may find uncomfortable, unappealing, or even shameful. It includes traits such as anger, jealousy, greed, or even aspects of our sexuality that we have been taught to hide. Yet, these shadow elements are not inherently negative. They are simply unacknowledged aspects of the self. By confronting the shadow and integrating it into our conscious awareness, we become more complete. Rather than projecting these hidden qualities onto others, we learn to accept and embrace them as part of our whole being. This integration leads to a deeper sense of self-acceptance, self-compassion, and emotional resilience. Alongside the integration of the shadow is the process of developing the inferior function, the least developed part of our psyche. Every individual has a dominant function, whether it is thinking, feeling, sensing, or intuition, and a secondary function that provides balance. However, the inferior function lies dormant, often hidden from our conscious awareness. It is typically the opposite of our dominant function and represents the area of the self that is most underdeveloped or repressed. For example, someone with a dominant thinking function might have an inferior feeling function, while someone with a dominant intuition might have a sensing function as their inferior aspect. The inferior function can manifest in unhealthy ways when it is ignored or repressed, but its integration offers significant opportunities for personal growth. As we develop and incorporate the inferior function, we become more balanced, flexible, and capable of responding to life's complexities in a more adaptive way. This process is an essential part of individuation because it leads to a fuller, more rounded self. Individuation also involves the development of a deeper connection with the self, capital S, which is the totality of the psyche. The self represents the archetype of wholeness and is often symbolized by images of the divine, the wise old man or woman, or other universal symbols that represent unity and integration. While the ego is concerned with our everyday identity, the self is the deeper, transcendent aspect of our being, representing the totality of who we are, including both conscious and unconscious aspects. The goal of individuation is to bring the ego into alignment with the self, so that we are no longer living merely in reaction to external circumstances or unconscious drives, but are able to live from a place of inner authenticity and integration. This alignment allows us to act in accordance with our true nature, rather than being shaped solely by external expectations or unconscious patterns. In order to achieve individuation, we must also confront and integrate our personal myths and narratives. These are the stories we tell ourselves about who we are, shaped by our upbringing, culture, and experiences. Many of these stories are unconsciously constructed and can limit our potential or perpetuate unhealthy patterns. For example, we may have internalized narratives of inadequacy or unworthiness, or we may believe that we are incapable of certain achievements due to past failures or traumas. The individuation process involves examining these personal myths and challenging their validity. It requires us to ask ourselves whether the beliefs we hold about ourselves are truly ours or whether they have been imposed upon us by others. By deconstructing these limiting stories, we begin to write our own narrative, one that is based on our authentic values, desires, and aspirations. Throughout the journey of individuation, there is often a deepening connection with the unconscious, particularly through dreams, symbols, and creative expression. The unconscious speaks to us in symbolic language, revealing insights, guidance, and messages that can lead to deeper self-awareness. By paying attention to our dreams and actively engaging with them, we can uncover hidden aspects of the self that are ready to be integrated. Creative pursuits such as art, music, or writing can also serve as a channel for the unconscious to express itself, offering us a window into parts of ourselves that we may not yet fully understand. Engaging with these unconscious processes allows us to make the unconscious conscious, bringing forth material that can guide us toward a fuller realization of our true self. Another key aspect of individuation is the development of a sense of meaning and purpose. As we move toward becoming our true self, we also come to understand our unique place in the world and the contribution we are meant to make. This process is not about pursuing external validation or conforming to societal expectations of success, but about discovering what truly resonates with our soul. The journey of individuation often involves questioning the meaning of life, exploring our values, and seeking a deeper sense of connection to something greater than ourselves. As we begin to align our actions with our deepest sense of purpose, we experience a sense of fulfillment and inner peace that cannot be derived from external accomplishments or material possessions. The goal of individuation is not a destination but an ongoing process, one that continues throughout our lives. As we grow, evolve, and encounter new experiences, the process of individuation deepens. The challenges we face and the changes we undergo offer opportunities for further self-discovery and integration. It is a lifelong journey that invites us to become more fully who we are, shedding the layers of false identity and embracing the authenticity of our true self. This journey is not always easy. It requires courage, vulnerability, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. However, it is through this struggle that we experience the deepest forms of growth, and it is through this growth that we ultimately become our true selves. Individuation is the path to personal freedom, a path that allows us to live with greater purpose, meaning, and connection to the world around us. It is through this process that we come to understand our deepest potential and step into the fullness of who we are meant to be.